Alrighty, here we go. Um, Art history. The history of Western culture and civilization from 1720 to 1910 is the art history that we're doing for grade 12. And you'll have to answer questions for each and every single one of them. Um, what I'm starting on doing today is give you a little bit of an overview of the type of art that we'll be looking at, but I'm going to provide you some context because if you don't know what came before these art styles, you will not fully appreciate or understand what they are about, right? It's very important. Okay, it's like jumping in the middle of a movie. You have no clue as to how it started, right? Okay, give this 1 second.
Volleyball will continue tomorrow, Friday. So games will not happen today, but tomorrow morning, Friday. See you then.
Good, we continue. Okay, so we're doing Western civilization and culture. We're doing for grade 12 from 1720 to 1910. I think this is the most interesting time period in Western civilization because a lot of different things will shift, right? You'll find out. It's a lot of fun. Here we go. So this is the different types of art that we'll be looking at, and they come in order. So in the left top corner we have an example of a Rococo art piece, which is then followed by neoclassical artwork, which is the next one over, the one with the swords and the soldiers. The next time period will be romantic art, which is all about nature. Then we'll get to realism art, that's family in this like really old house, right? They're very poor, that's realism art. Then we get into the left corner, the woman with the parasol. That's going to be
A quick announcement for secondary reminder that when crossing the street to come to school, to use the lights. Please do not jaywalk. It is very dangerous on this street as many drivers do not go the speed limit, they go much over. I've seen a number of students jaywalking lately and almost getting hit. So please be careful and make sure you cross the lights. Thank you.
So that one is Impressionism art, the one on the left bottom corner. Then that is followed by three different types of art, and that is going to be the beginning of modern art or contemporary art. And that is going to be Post-Impressionism. And then the bat is going to be Expressionism, the one with the Jesus is going to be Fauvism, and the one on the right is going to be Cubism, right? Now all of these types of art follow each other, and they're always a reaction to things that came before, because art always wants to renew itself. Same with music, you know. You might like appreciate your grandmother's music that she likes to play, but the next generation will always try and come up with something new, right? So art is always a reaction as to things that came before, and it also goes back and grabs elements of things that came before and make it into something new, right? So this is your grade 12 art. So I'm going to explain a little bit how we got to these points, because if you don't know how we got, for example, to Rococo art, then you have no idea. If I say to you, okay, well, these people is only art for the aristocracy, then you say to me, well, who is the aristocracy, right? And if I say to you the next one, neoclassical with the swords, I say, well, here they're trying to do some great classical values, and they're trying to understand of like make this is first time art for people to really appreciate the civilizations that came before them, and it's to inspire them to try and become a democracy, right? And then the next one would be like romantic art, and I say, okay, this is romantic art. It's all about how nature is super big and powerful and humans are not, right? Why did we get to this point, right? And then the next one is realism art, which is art that is very real in several different ways. It's trying to capture the real struggles of people's lives, right? Well, then you say, well, how come the people are struggling in life? So there's always a connection with what's going on in society, because art is made in society. So that is what it's teaching you about, right? And then the next one in the bottom left is all about people finally having like a little bit of freedom and people being able to afford a little bit of art. So it's all about new and interesting modern life, which is then followed by the beginning of modern art, because we're talking about the liberation of shape and form and color, right? So how did we get to that point? Like, lots and lots of questions to be answered, right? But to understand any of this, you cannot just look at one thing, you have to see the whole human story as a whole, right? So here we go. So this is the grade 12 art history: Rococo, Neoclassical, Romantic, Realism, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Expressionism, Fauvism, and Cubism, right? And this is the history of Western civilization. Okay, so what is Western civilization? Western civilization is the civilization from Europe, basically, right? So European history. Now, the Europeans colonized a lot of lands in the world, right? Including North and South America, and we are in Canada at the moment, right? So the culture here is basically European culture, right? So a lot of European customs and things, and language, of course, but also the painting, right? So that is really what we're talking about. Okay, so it all starts in Europe, but that is not, well, that's where our history starts, but that is not where human history starts, because human history starts in Africa, right? The oldest human remains have been found in Africa. Now, if you believe in evolution, which I do, right, that means that you feel or think that humans have evolved over the course of many, many years, right? From basically sort of monkeys into human beings, right? Now, this is a very long process, as you can imagine, right? And in the beginning, people used to hunt and gather, right? Now, if you hunt and gather, then basically you live with your family in a somewhat small group, right? And then what do? You hunt animals and you gather stuff that you can eat, like berries and things, for example, right? Now, people do this for a long time. You can imagine it's very active lifestyle. You're moving a lot because you have to follow all the livestock that you're trying to hunt. So people did not really have really big families, right? Because you have a child, I have a child myself, you have to carry it around for a long time. So it's very demanding, right? Old people also could not really keep up that well with the group when they were moving around too much, right? So families were pretty small. Now, of course, immediately when people started to live in caves, for example, then they started to do these wonderful art pieces. So art has always been a part of culture, right? Because when you're done eating and you have like made a fire, I taught you at the beginning of the course how you can make charcoal, so they did, right? So immediately they start to paint, right? They start to paint and draw things on the wall. Now, what do they paint? They paint all kinds of really cool animals, because animals very important, because animals is food, right? So they paint a lot of animals on the wall. Now, up until not that long ago, the oldest cave drawings were found in France. So people said, yeah, okay, so basically that's were the oldest ones, but then recently they discovered even older ones in Indonesia, right? Which is really cool and interesting. So basically the story of human development is the same all over the world. It doesn't matter. We have like now evolved into being different countries with different languages, but in essence we all share the same steps in the development of our evolution, right? It's all the same. We just have over time changed a little bit our skin tones and our languages, but essentially we are the same species, right? Okay, good. So a lot of art is being made by these people, right? Super cool. Of course, also statues are being made. These are fertility statues. They're there. You can basically, use this in the hope that you're getting a child. And of course, having a child is very important because it ensures the survival of your species, right? So in the beginning, people make simple tools, which makes us like better than the animals, or like, more efficient because we can use tools. Then, of course, hunt together bigger animals, blah, 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 like this stuff, Cool, cool, cool. And then people discover that it is also a possibility to start to domesticate animals, right? So they start to keep animals for food and as pets, right? And they also learn that you can grow crops and start to plant things, right? Now, this really is the beginning of civilization, right? Because what you start to have now is you start to have people settling down. So they start to build like societies, and these societies are called tribal societies, right? So in a tribal society, you usually have like the elders, the oldest people. Of course, they have the most experience because they have lived the longest. They sort of make up all the rules, right? Because if you live in a society, you also have to come up with rules. For example, it would be pretty lame if somebody in the society would just grab everybody else's stuff the whole time, right? So people start to come up with rules. How to organize the society. You also get specialization right now. Some people really like to farm, other people might really like to hunt, other people really like to cook, other people really like to build shelters. So really you get like systems on how to organize a larger group, and that is the beginning, right? And that goes the same for anywhere in the world, right? So these societies, these early societies, are called tribal societies. So what do they share? Well, they share the same language with each other. They share the same culture and clothing, right? The same religions, the same behaviors and traditions, right? Okay, so I want to quickly talk to you about religion, right? And I want to talk to you about what is the purpose of religion, because religion have a fundamental purpose in society, because it helps people live together in harmony, because a religion gives purpose to people's lives. It will explain why things are happening. It will also ensure that if you are from a specific religion, that you follow certain rules. Now, if you live together with other people which also follow the same rules, and you believe in the same God, then you have a lot of things in common. So it binds societies together. That is very important to understand, right? So religion is super important, especially in early societies, right? So, example, there is going to be, and I just googled some quick phenomenons like in the sky. There's a lot of things that happen, right? Look, so for example, if you were to look at these things, these are northern lights, right? How do you explain this? Maybe you're sitting in like a little cave, you're looking outside, and then you see this, right? So these northern lights, they become part of religion, right? There's all these things that people cannot really explain. You can only explain these if there is something greater than you, right? Something greater in you than you, that is something you can worship, which is basically giving some purpose or some meaning to your life. Because without any purpose or meaning in life, what is the point, right? So religion helps you live together in harmony with other people and bind you to a group. It also helps you appreciate or explain things that you cannot explain, all these different phenomenons. So religion is, yeah, it's fairly important for the development of any civilization, right? So I wanted to tell you that quickly, right? So religion's main purpose, if you ask me, is showing a difference between something called chaos and something that has order, right? If you living in chaos, that means that everything is just one giant mess and you have zero control over it, so you can never relax, right? But if you have everything in order, then it's simple, right? For example, your room that you are in at your house right now, if your stuff is laying everywhere on the ground or on the tables and everything is a giant mess, then you might get a little bit stressed because maybe you have to go to school, but you do not remember where you have put your keys, right? This can be like the beginning of a horrible day because you're running around through your room trying to find wherever the stuff is that you need to leave, right? That is chaos. You feel stress, everything is out of control, it's not working, right? It's not good. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, or the opposite, or the contrast, is order. And order is where everything has its own spot. For example, I put my keys always in the same spot. That is awesome because then when I have to go, I know where they are, right? So different, like you can live in harmony or in order with each other, which means you are relatively safe because you know nobody is going to come and run into your house and steal all your stuff or attack you or anything. So those are all rules. Now, a god or somebody you worship is something you jointly decide that they come up with these rules that you then have to follow so that you can live in order, right? That is religion in essence. Good. Excellent. Okay. So, tribal societies mainly built in the beginning, when they start to build tiny villages, they all come up to the same idea. Look, I'll show you some examples. All of these things here are called longhouses, right? Every single society has created these, and still people live in them to this day, right? So basically a longhouse is a house that you usually build out of natural elements that are around you, often like wood and things like this. And you build a big long house, so your whole family can live in this one house. And on top of that, you can put your livestock, your animals, your chickens, your whatever you have, you can put those into your longhouse too for the nighttime. Because in the nighttime, hunters like animals, you know, like, I don't know, whatever animals, wolves, lions, whatever lives close to you, might come in the nighttime to attack your animals, right? So people live in longhouses together with their animals. Now that's gonna be significant in history, in the history of Western civilization, especially later on when we're going to talk about the colonization of North and South America, right? Because we'll get to that point when we get to that point, right? So everybody will live in longhouses at a certain point in every single, what we now call different countries, right? Okay. So keep that in mind. That is a very simple system. Everybody does it. You can keep all your stuff in your house, your animals in your house, your family in your house. Everything is cool. Everything is safe. You build a wall, right? Okay. So these are some modern day longhouses that are still somewhere deep off in the Amazon rainforest. This is a helicopter flying over like a village that did not yet come in contact with people other than, you know, the people that already live in the forest. So these are their longhouses, right? It really is a system that happens everywhere. Now I'm going to quickly go over the different ages over here. So in the beginning we have the Stone Age, then we get into the Bronze Age, then we get into the Iron Age, basically, right? So here we go. We have different eras. Now we are going to be talking about the medieval age and a little bit about the ancient age. That is where I'm going to start your art history with you. And the reason why I'm going to start with you is because the invention of writing happens before this time period, and the people in Europe mainly in the beginning come in contact with ancient Greece culture and writing, and that is something that Europeans will over time base their foundation on. So they will read all the written records of the ancient Greeks and Romans, and they will adapt and make this essentially their own culture, right? European culture is hugely based upon Greek and Roman culture, classical culture. Now you might say, well, why are the Europeans basing their culture upon this? And that is what I'm going to explain to you, because we'll get there. here we go. So this is ancient Greece, right? So this is Greece before it was one country. They were all tiny, little, different city-states, right? So a city-state is basically a city that is also its own country, right? So a city-state would be like something like this, you know? Here we go. You have like the government buildings in the left, you have like some entertainment buildings, and you have the people living in the village around it, and then together the people control all the land around them, and then they eat and they feed off of that, right? So they basically are completely self-sufficient. Now, there were lots and lots of different ones over here, right? They usually have like their a police is a city, right? They're self-sufficient, independent. They have like a wall around them to protect themselves, and they have small populations, right? Now, they all shared the same language, the ancient Greek language, Latin, right? And they also shared the same culture and beliefs, right? They did a lot of business with each other, and they helped each other. Sometimes they would make alignments, sometimes they would fight with each other, right? But when people of like different nations, like the Persians came, for example, then they would all stand together because they all share the same values and the same language and the same gods and culture, right? So those are Greek city-states. Now, they wrote down all kinds of works of art, fiction, scientific process, philosophy, all these works of, all these writing records, they all have been, yeah, sort of adopted later on by the Europeans, right? So that is really where we take our culture from. Good. Okay, so this is like a nice little picture of it. Now you can see over here is like on the right hand side is like a temple, because the Greeks believed in many different gods, right? If you believe in many different gods, you call this poly, which means many theism, right? So here we go. So the Greeks believed in the beginning there was chaos, right? So chaos is still a word that, well, I was just talking about chaos actually, right? It's still a word that we use today, and you'll find out as I'm speaking a lot of English words and concepts come straight from here, right? Just so you know. So in the beginning there's chaos, right? It's basically just, yeah, insanity, like zero control, nothing. It's weird. So basically after chaos there will be like new gods. There will be Gaia and Eros and Erebus and Tartarus, and those are the first gods. That's like the earth, for example, right? Now Gaia, they're all female. Gaia is the first one. She'll get like a child named Uranus. They will have children, and the children will be cyclopses and giant monsters and titans and all kinds of big things. And then there will be one who's named Kronos, and they will have Kronos and Rhea. Now, Kronos thinks all these titans that are being born, they're basically monsters, you know, like with 100 hands and eyes, and like they're terrible things, and he thinks they're so ugly. So together with Rhea, or actually together with Rhea, he comes up with or with his mother, sorry, Gaia, I'm sorry. He comes up with a plan because he no longer wants any more brothers and sisters, right? So what does he do? He gets this like giant scythe, and he makes his father very drunk, and then he cuts off his like reproductive organs, right? So basically no more can be born, right? Now, of course, it's pretty mean to castrate your father, right? So he does feel a little bit remorseful every now and then, right? So how does he express this remorsefulness? Well, he expressed this as followed. He is very afraid that when he has children, that his children will also overturn or overrun him, just like he has done to his father, right? That's guilt. If you're guilty of something, it will eat you away, right? This is a great lesson to be learned, right? So as the people develop these stories and tell them to each other, they also, of course, inspire different values. So what can you learn from this? Well, from this you can learn if you do something mean, it's probably gonna like make you afraid of somebody else doing something similar to you at a certain point in time, right? So they serve a purpose, these stories, right? They really do. Good. So Kronos and Rhea are going to have lots and lots of children, and these children are going to be the following one. It's going to be Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hestia, right? And a very special one named Zeus, and that is one you 100% have heard from before, right? So every time a child is born, what happens is Kronos immediately takes it out of the womb and devours it or eats it, right? Because he's afraid the children are going to overrun him. So let me show you. Oh, I still have it up. Perfect. So if you're seeing any paintings in a museum ever that show an image like this of a grown man eating a child, then what you are looking at is you're looking at Kronos, who is eating his children, right? So there is lots of paintings in history made about this, right? Now, for example, if you click on this one, it says Saturn devouring his son, and then I will explain a little bit later that all the Greek gods will later be relabeled into Roman gods. So I'll explain when we get to that point, right? So Greek mythology is still something for a really long time that people in Western civilization make paintings about or tell stories about. It's still very present till this day, right? Very cool stuff. I really like these paintings. They are super savage. Oh my lord, right? Okay, so he eats all his children. And then you can imagine his wife is not so excited about him eating all the children, right? So the last one that is born is going to be Zeus. So as soon as Zeus is born, what does she do? She quickly puts him aside, grabs a stone, wraps a stone into a blanket, and hoppa, gives it to Kronos. And Kronos, hop, he's eaten so many babies already, he just swallows Zeus whole, or so he thinks, but it turns out to be a stone. So then Zeus gets sent away, and then Zeus grows up, right? And then one day Zeus decides, when he's big, that he's coming to take revenge on his father, right? So he makes his father drunk, he grabs like a big sword or a scythe, and he's up, cuts the belly open of the father, and out pop his brothers and sisters. And they're all full-grown gods, right? And then there's going to be a giant war. A war between Zeus and his brothers, fighting against the old gods and the titans, right? And then Zeus and his brothers and sisters win, right? So they win. So then they have to decide who is going to rule what specific part of the world, right? Or as they know it. So Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Oops. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. I can't find them. Okay. I don't understand why Hades is not here, but it doesn't matter. So those are the main three brothers, right? So Zeus is the all-powerful god. He is the god of the sky and the earth, right? And he has the big lightning bolt. Then Poseidon and Hades, they draw straws to see who's going to be the god of what empire. Now, Poseidon draws the straw that he's going to be the king or the lord or the god of the ocean, right? So, and all the water. So that is his domain. And then Hades is going to be the god of the underworld, right? So all different gods have different purposes in society, right? So if you are believing any of these, like, well, you are, of course, if you are a Greek person, if you believe in any of these gods, every single god have its own purpose in life, right? For example, if you want to have a good harvest, then you would go and pray to Demeter, because she is going to, or Demeter, like, and then you would pray to her in the hope that she would bless you with a good return, you know, on all the crop that you grow, right? And if you have to go onto the ocean, well, you better pray to Poseidon for safe passage, right? So every single aspect of your life will have its own god linked to it, which is shaped over centuries of people telling stories and adding stories, and it will give you a, an understanding of life and an appreciation, and it gives you purpose, right? And it is really the very interesting stories. They're stories that will teach you on how to live, what happens if you anger the gods. Like, there's a lot of belief, right, in there. Good. Now, they also use this to explain their life and civilization, right? For example, Hades, the lord of the underworld, lives in the underworld. Well, that's where all the dead people go. That doesn't seem like a very nice place to live, right? So he has a lot of trouble finding a wife, right? So he's pretty upset. He goes to his brother Zeus. He says, "Hey Zeus, I cannot find a wife. It is so annoying. I want to have a wife. How do I get a wife?" Right? Now, I'm gonna show you some examples here. Okay, so Zeus will have a child, right? Zeus will have many different children with many different people. You can see over here Zeus and Hera, Demeter and Zeus, Zeus and Leto, and we can keep on going on, right? So basically, Demeter is his wife, right? His first wife. So Demeter and Zeus have a child, and the child's name is Persephone, right? Now, Zeus says to Hades, "You know what? Why don't you marry my daughter Persephone?" And then Hades says, "Oh yeah, you know what? That sounds great." So they, you know, one day Persephone is walking around in the forest, or like close to her house in the fields. It doesn't really matter, right? Then the ground opens up, giant hole, and she can see in the depths of the abyss. There's like Hades, you know, and Hades like flies up, grabs her, and brings her down all the way to the underworld and say, "We are getting married. Your father Zeus has said we're getting married." So then, hoppa, they're getting married down there, and then Persephone has to live there together with Zeus, right? Now, Demeter, the wife of Zeus, is super angry about it, as you can imagine, right? She's like, "Why did you not ask? Don't get to see my daughter now, blah, blah, blah." Super angry. I would be pretty angry too if I was his wife. Anyways, so what happens is she gets so angry and upset that she refuses, because she's the god of like agriculture, she refuses anything to grow. Like when it's supposed to be cold, she makes it super hot. When it's supposed to be hot, she makes it super cold. When there is the plants are getting dry, she refuses to give them any rain. When she's giving rain, she's giving so much rain that all the plants drown. Basically, the people are not being able to grow any food, right? So they get super upset, and they pray and they pray and they say, "Zeus, Zeus, please, you know, we're trying to eat, but nothing will grow, you know. Please, please, please do something about it." So Zeus will then talk to Demeter and say, "Okay, Demeter, you know, like we gotta come up with a solution over here, right? How are we going to solve this?" So they come up with the following agreement. Half of the year, Persephone will live in the underworld, and the other half of the year she will be living on the normal world together with Demeter and Zeus, right? So that means this: half of the year Demeter is angry and she's missing her child, and that is going to be the fall, and it's going to be the winter when nothing will be able to grow, right? Now, the other half of the year, the spring and the summer, is when she is happy. So when she's happy, all the flowers start to grow and food will be able to be produced, right? So that is how the Greek people in the beginning explained that there are different seasons, right? Now, these Greek mythology stories are super interesting and I really appreciate them, right? Okay. Now, I can tell you many more. I will tell you one more super quickly about Prometheus, because Prometheus is a titan that basically switched sides in the Great War against Kronos, right? And he helps Zeus with this war. Now, Prometheus then is asked by Zeus to create the first humans. So Prometheus creates humans, right, out of clay. He creates humans in the shape of the Greek gods. They basically walk upright, so they make a difference between the animals and humans. So he creates us. Now, he also gives us the greatest gift he can give us, but he's not allowed to give us fire, right? Zeus says, no, you cannot give them any fire, but then Prometheus still gives human beings fire, right? So, and that's a very important invention, because fire allows us to live in places where we would normally not survive because it is too cold. It will also help us fend off animals, and it will also help us to be able to cook food, right? So the invention of fire, it also helps us to forge steel. Like, fire is such an important invention, and we have Prometheus to thank for that, right? Okay. Now, when Zeus finds out that Prometheus has given us fire, then he decides to punish him by tying him in the mountains to the rocks with chains. And every day an eagle will come and land on him and eat out his liver while he's still alive. And then at the end of the day, when the liver is eaten, the bird will fly away. Overnight, the liver will grow back, his wounds will heal, and the next morning, the eagle will come again. So that is his punishment for giving us life and especially fire, right? Okay, so Zeus is a pretty savage god. Now, the Greeks were very much into their gods and culture. It was very important to them, right? So they dedicated a lot of resources into building temples for their gods and a lot of beautiful art and statues, right? The sculptures of the Greeks are amazing, right? So very important to them. See? Temples like this, super cool stuff. Okay, so why is all of this important? Well, all of this is very important because thanks to a mythological story called The Judgment of Paris, European culture starts to grow, basically, and I'm going to explain to you that story, right? Okay, now, this is a painting called The Judgment of Paris. Now, if you look at it, basically what you get to see is you get to see naked ladies, 1, 2, 3, some naked babies, you get to see a peacock, you get to see a boy with an apple in his hand, and you get to see a guy with some wings on his head, right? Excellent. So what is this story about? Don't know. Next one. Look, this is the same. We have an apple, some ladies, and here we have some ladies and a boy and an apple. Here we have a guy and some ladies and an apple, and here we have like some ladies and an apple, right? Now, what is this story all about? Well, it's clearly an important story because it's been painted many different times by many different people, right? So I'm going to tell you this story. It's a very good story. Here we go. So let's go back to the map over here. Choop, 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 choop. Here we go. Okay. Now, please take a look at this map for a moment, because there's a couple of things that we need to know about this, right? So, in the left bottom-ish, like a little bit up above the word Mediterranean Sea, is a place called Sparta. That's important to know, because that's something we're going to be talking about. Now, if you go diagonally up, there's where it says Asia Minor, then a little bit to the left of that is a place called Troy. Those are very important places, and those ones we're talking about at a later point. Now, if you go from Troy all the way to the left, you you find a place called Mount Olympus, right? Now, that is a mountain in Greece, a very big mountain, right? Now, this mountain is the place where the gods live. That is where they have their palaces. Now, why a mountain, you might say? Well, it's very simple, right? This mountain is so high that oftentimes the top of the mountain is covered in clouds. So for anybody in ancient civilization, it makes total sense where the earth and the sky connect to each other, obviously, should be a magical place, right? So basically, the mountains keep on going up until they disappear into the skies. Now, of course, this is where the gods live. So many people will try and go and visit, you know, but you can imagine none of them return, because if you are going to walk way up and high in the mountains, and you're going to end up at a certain point in the clouds, that is basically going to be the same as when the clouds come down, so it's going to be all mist, so that means you cannot see anything, and if you cannot see anything while walking in the mountains, it's super easy to either get lost or take a misstep and plummet down in some depth and die, right? So Mount Olympus is the place where the gods live or have their big castle or whatever, right, they live in. It doesn't really matter, right? So Mount Olympus is very important because in Mount Olympus, in this story, there's going to be a wedding. It's going to be a fantastic wedding, and all the gods are invited to come to this wedding. All gods except for one, and the one that's not allowed to come, her name is Eris. Now, who is Eris, you might ask? Well, Eris is the goddess of strife. So what is strife? Strife is an old English word that nobody uses anymore, right? Strife basically means fighting or being unhappy, basically, right? So, for example, if you are in a relationship with somebody, but you are always fighting with each other, there's always tension. That is what strife is. So the Greeks had a goddess for if you have a bad relationship. That meant not that you did something wrong necessarily, that meant that Eris was just making your life difficult, right? So that is why she was not invited to come to the wedding, because wherever she went, she would make people that really happy with each other feel really upset with each other, right? Terrible goddess. Anyways, the wedding is going on, everything is amazing, everybody's having a great time. But then, dunk, 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 somebody knock on the gate, right? So everybody's like, what? How can that be? Everybody's here. It's a great time, you know. Why is there all of a sudden somebody knocking on the door? And then somebody goes to the door and opens it. And then they found a golden apple. And with this golden apple, it's a present from Eris, the goddess of strife. And she says, this golden apple is for the most beautiful goddess out of all the goddesses. And this is the beginning of a huge problem, because now the party has basically stopped, because all the ladies at the party say, well, obviously I am the most beautiful. No, I am the most beautiful. So everybody already has strife so quickly, right? But then, in the end, everybody agrees. There's only 3 real contenders to being the most beautiful woman there. Everybody knows it. It can either be Hera, the Greek goddess of marriage, who also is Zeus' wife, his second wife, right? The second one in line. Now, of course, if Zeus was any smart, because he has to make the decision who the apples go to, he could just say, you know what, of course, Hera, you are my wife, you are by far the most beautiful goddess out there. Simple, problem solved. But then, the next one is going to be Athena. Athena is the daughter of Zeus and Hera, and she is the goddess of wisdom in war and skills in war, wisdom and war and skill. Anyways, So she's the daughter. So Zeus could have easily said, okay, you know what, Hera, of course you are the most beautiful, but together we created an even more beautiful human being, our beautiful daughter Athena, right? Problem solved. But then there was one more in the mix, and that is going to be Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and beauty. Well, there you go, right? So Zeus, of course, he's like, you know what? I don't not want to settle this score. I cannot win. If I will pick, if I pick Aphrodite, of course, then my wife and my child are going to be super angry at me. If I pick my child, then my wife might be angry at me. He's just like, I cannot make up my mind. Go away, please. So he comes up with an idea. He says, you know what? I'm not going to make a decision. I'm going to send you with Hermes, the messenger of the gods. That's this guy with these wings, you know. He has the wings on his little helmet over there and also on his Achilles pieces. Give me 1 second, guys. Ooh.
Cut this one.
Cut this one out?
Yes.
Okay.
Put your oval in here.
I will do that.
But here's a botched up one I did a fill.
It still looks cool.
So,
Nice.
just finished it. It's still wet.
Okay, I will cut this out.
Alright.
Like this or more perfect?
Oh no, just, you know how you have the in the oval?
Oh yeah,
So-
just use that as
Yeah,
a
use your
frame.
template
Cool,
and
will do. Put it on.
Trace it on and
Excellent.
we'll use that. But
Good. That was my friend Mr. Poelen, my dear friends. We continue. Okay. Yes. So he doesn't want to make up a decision, so he sends the messenger of the gods together with the old golden apple to Earth. He sends them to a boy named Paris, which is also, of course, the name of a city in France, right? Paris. So it's named after this boy. This boy was a prince of the city of Troy. Okay, so Hermes gives him the apple and say, okay, Zeus will ask you to pick one of the three goddesses, right? So here he is. He's thinking about it. Who should I pick? Who should I pick? I do not know, right? So he doesn't know. So then the goddesses say, you know what? I'll make you a promise. So Hera says, if you pick me, I will make you the king of Europe. Interesting. That actually, ladies and gentlemen, is what Europe is named after, right? Because that is how they already called it in the Greek times. Okay. So then he says, yeah, sounds good, but I do not really want to be the king of Europe. Then Athena says, well, if you pick me, I will ensure that you are so smart when it comes to warfare that you will never ever lose another battle again, right? So he says, okay, that sounds really cool, but then let's hear what Aphrodite has to say. So Aphrodite says, well, I will make the most beautiful woman on the whole earth fall in love with you. Now, everybody in the Greek influenced world knew, obviously, that this was Helen or Helena of Sparta. Now, Helena of Sparta, ladies and gentlemen, here she goes. Look. These are Greek statues of Helena of Sparta, right? So the Greeks found that this was the most beautiful woman, right? So they made a statue of her. Now, this is movies made about this story in different time periods, and I want you to think about this for a second because it is very interesting, right? If you think about it. So the one on the left is a painting of Helena of Sparta. It's debatable whether she's very beautiful. It doesn't really matter. It's sort of in there as a joke. But the woman on the right top corner is playing a movie, and she's playing the role of Helena of Sparta. Now this is a movie from 1950, roughly, right? So in 1950, they thought that this was the most beautiful woman, or the most beautiful actress at least, so they made her play the most beautiful woman in ancient times, right? Now, the lady below that is playing the same role, right? She also Helena of Sparta, but this is a movie from the 1990s, right? So you can see the idea of beauty is something that changes over time. right? So in the 1950s, a more mature woman was more attractive, where in the 1990s, younger girls will become more attractive to fulfill this role, right? And that is the idea of beauty is something that changes over time, right? For example, when you look at these ones, you might say, well, these women, they are a little bit overweight, you're a little bit chubby, for example, right? But then I will say to you, well, these are paintings from like the 19, well, not 19, from the 1700s, right? Now, in the 1700s, people did not have any fridges yet, nor did they have any electricity. So basically, you had to prepare all your food in the summer and then make sure you survive the winter season, right? So if you have a little bit of a reserve on your body, like a little bit of a fat reserve, that is great because that means you can survive a harsh winter or a long war and you can provide for your family and your children, right? If somebody from the 17 or 1600s would see any girl from nowadays, they would think she would be dying because she does not have any reserves. You could not survive a winter with without any food, let alone a week, you know, if you have nothing on your skin. Now these ladies look totally different again, right? These ladies look like statues. These ones are based off of classical statues, right? These ones are painted way later, right? Like in the 1900s. These ones are painted in the Middle Ages. And these ones are traditional Greek art out of this time period with the same story, right? So how we portray beauty is something that changes over time, right? Ever changing. Good. So why is this story important? Well, it's very important because Helena of Sparta is already married to the brother of the king of Sparta, right? Now, because Paris is a prince, so he's royal family, he can basically visit any other kingdom or city-state in the Greek influence sphere, right? So he sends messages to Sparta and he says, hello, I am, Paris, you know me from the king. I would like to come and visit with you guys. And then, of course, because he's royal family, he gets invited, of course, to come and spend some time in Sparta. So he does, He takes his boat, sails all the way to Sparta, and then he gets to visit the king. And then the king says, oh, how you doing? Oh, have you ever met Helena? Oh, no, Helena, okay. And then they meet, and then obviously they fall head over heels in love. It is fantastic, right? So the next day, early in the morning, they sneak off together, they jump in a boat, and they sail back to the city of Troy, right? So they go to the city of Troy, they sail back. Now you can imagine when the king wakes up and he hears that basically Helena is abducted, he gets really angry, right? So what does he do? He sends messages to all the different city-states in the Greek world, and he says, look, this is what happened, Prince Paris comes to my city and he steals my brother's wife. Now, the stealing of somebody's wife is something that is very much not done in Greek culture, right? So he forces all the other Greek city-states to defend the honor of his brother. And they all say, you are right, this is not done. We are going to all send our armies to the city of Troy, and then we will surround the city, and it will force them to give Helena back, right? Now, all of these people, of these different cities, now have to send their army, right? Now, none of them have like a professional standing army, so basically when you have a war in this time period, then the leader of your city will say, okay, stop working the fields, pick up your weapons, we're gonna have to go, all of us, sail to the city of Troy, because we got to get Helena back from Paris, right? And then everybody says, oh yeah, sure, we'll do this, it's gonna be great, like the whole of all the Greece city-states versus the city of Troy. Oh, it's gonna be peanuts. We're just gonna roll up over there, all of us, with all of our might, and as soon as they see us, they will regret their decision. They will probably just give her back, and then we'll be done with it. We'll be home in a week, is what they think. So, all of them say goodbye to their families. They sail to the city of Troy, and they surround it. They say, okay, give Helena back. But then the people of Troy, or the king of Troy, says, no, they're so in love, we will not do it. And then this giant siege starts, and they're trying to get into the city, but they cannot break the walls. Now, why can they not break the walls is yet based in another Greek mythology story. So when the city of Troy is starting to be built, then they're trying to build a wall. Now, this wall is looking horrible, right? It's like not working at all. So, Zeus and Poseidon have a bet. Zeus says to Poseidon, I bet you cannot change yourself into a human form and help these people build a wall within the next couple of years. And then Poseidon says, you know what, Zeus, I will take your bet. Not only will I help them finish it in time, I will make sure that this wall will never be penetrated from the outside. It will withstand anything you throw of it, right? So basically, this wall is a legendary wall. It's basically built by a god, right? So they're trying to break it, they're trying to invade it, it doesn't work. And they end up surrounding this city for 10 long years. 10 years, such a long time, right? So you can imagine, all the soldiers are pretty upset. They thought they would be back in a week, but they have now left their homes and they're stuck here for 10 years. So you can imagine, well, I honestly myself, if I had to go to a war, which I don't want to do, period, I'm not going if they ask me, because I think it's pointless. Anyways, let's say they send me off to go and fight a war, and I think I'll be back in a week. So I say, okay, goodbye wife, I'll be back in a week, and goodbye child, I'll be back in a week. Then if I'm stuck somewhere for 10 years without seeing my wife and family, I would be pretty upset myself, right? As you can imagine. Good. So they're stuck there for 10 years. Ugh, so annoying, right? So then I got to talk to you a little bit about Odysseus. So Odysseus is the guy who has invents this thing over here, right? So he comes up with a cunning plan, and this plan basically involves them creating a giant wooden horse. So they built this giant wooden horse, and they leave it in front of the gate of the city of Troy because they cannot get in, right? So they leave this horse, and they all disappear in the night in their ships, and they go to a neighboring bay which cannot be seen from the big fortified place, right? So then they leave. So then in the morning, when the people wake up, they see this wooden horse, and some people say, okay, that's great, let's burn it, right? They're gone, hooray. And then other people say, no, it's a gift, we'll bring it back in. They've given up, they've all left, right? So they bring it inside of the city walls, and they have a great party because they have been surrounded for 10 years, hooray. Finally, it's over, right? Everybody's drinking, everybody's happy. But then in the middle of the night, a little trap door opens, some soldiers jump out, they run to the gate, they kill the people that are guarding the gate, and they open the gate from the inside, and then all the armies have come back on the cover of darkness, and they run into the city, they flood the city, and they basically kill and murder everybody because they have been away from their families. They're so angry with the people, they attack and destroy the whole city of Troy. Now, most of the people of Troy are dead, but some of them escape, right? So the ones that escape will now have to try and find a new place to live, and they are not welcome anywhere in Greece, because every other state in Greece hates the people of Troy, and they hate them because they have forced all of their families to be separated from each other for 10 years, right? So none of them wants anything to do with the people of Troy. So the people of Troy will have to find a new place to live. And what do? They get into some boats and they sail and they have to leave Greece. And they will end up in a place called Italy. Cool. Now, on a side note, after Odysseus makes the wooden horse, he is going to sail back to where he comes from, to the city where he lives. And this is what this book is about, the Odyssey. And it's a period of like 10 years where he's trying to get home. And on this, in this period, he has lots and lots of adventures. And these adventures are super interesting. So if you ever want to learn, please read this or find like an audiobook version of it, because they're very interesting stories. There's Cyclops in there. There's like all kinds of like super interesting stuff. I could tell you for hours, but I won't. Okay, good. So they move to a new place. They sail and they land in Italy. That is where they get. And then they start to build a city. Now the city that they build is going to be Rome, right? And it's going to turn into a humongous empire, the Roman Empire, right? Now the Roman Empire in the beginning is just a tiny, tiny little city-state. Then it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So it's basically going to conquer the whole of Europe, most of the Europe, sorry, the Middle East, the coast of North Africa. And when they become all big and powerful, they decide it's time to change their history a little bit. Because their original history is, we got destroyed, had to escape from Greece, were no longer welcome, had to find a new home. So then we did. To, hey, we have now invaded the whole of Greece. We own it. And we own most of the world as we know it. So why don't we tell ourselves a more interesting origin story? And that is the story of Romulus and Remus. So they are half-gods. Right? A half-god is a child that is born out of the marriage or like whatever, whatever, how you make babies, between a god and a mortal human being, right? Then you get into being a half-god. So their founders are half-gods, just so you know, right? So Romulus and Remus are two brothers, they're twins. And basically they are between the Roman god of war named Mars and Rhea Silva, right? So they have babies. Now with any good Greek or Roman mythology story, you always have that the father is afraid that the child is gonna overrun them one day, right? So what do? He wants to, of course, also murder his own children, right? But then Rhea decides that she doesn't want her children to be murdered, so she put them in a little tiny basket and she put them on the river. And then they flow down the river and then they land up somewhere in the banks, in the reeds, and then of course they are hungry, so they start to cry. Now, there's a wolf walking around, a female wolf, a she-wolf, and she hears the babies crying. She walks up to the babies, and she's pretty hungry, but then she realizes these are some very special babies. So she decides to take care of the babies, right? And that is what you see in this statue over here, right? So they changed their origin story from we had to escape our own country to actually our founder was a half-god and he was raised by a wolf. Of course, that's way cooler, right? So that is their story that they change later. Good. Okay, now this is the history of the Roman city, right? So in the beginning, the 8th century before Jesus Christ is born, it's just this tiny little green wall, right? And then it keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Now, if you create a city, you start building a wall, right? Then basically you want more people to come and live in your city. Well, how do you get people to live in your city, right? You open your gates. You say, okay, you are welcome to live here. Now, what motivation would somebody have to leave one city to go and live into a second city, right? Why? Why would somebody move? Well, for several different reasons. Reason number one, you are banished and no longer welcome in another city, right? Now, when do you get banished? You get banished if you are a criminal, right? So the Romulus and Remus open their gates to all kinds of criminals, right? Now, also they make promises. So they say, hey, you know what? If you come live over here and you have invest some money, we'll put you in the Senate, right? You will become part of like the ruling class. You will have privileges. Together with me, you can like run the country, right? Basically, or run our city. So a lot of wealthy people will come, a lot of criminals will come, a lot of people that have debts in other cities that can no longer pay them will come, right? Because if you owe a lot of money and you just move to a different country, right, then you might get away with it. Now, in these times, there is all these international treaties. For example, if you're a criminal and you flee to another country, most countries have like laws that they can say, okay, this person that we're looking for who has committed some crime needs to get back, and they get sent back, right? There's international treaties about that. Now, in this time period, there's no international treaties about this at all, right? So in the beginning, there's mainly just lots and lots of criminals. Now, Romulus and Remus, they are the first ones, basically, to build this. They get into a giant argument, and Romulus kills his brother, Remus, and he becomes the one and only king. And the city is named after him, right? The city of Rome. Okay. Now, they start to grow and grow, but they don't have a lot of women living in their city, right? So, of course, they want to come up with an idea on how they can populate their city a little bit with more women, right? So, they come up with the following idea. They send messages to other cities and they say, hey, you know us, we're the Romans, you know, it's all cool. How about you guys visit us, because we're going to host some Olympic Games. Olympic Games, you know, we still have Olympic Games. So in Olympic Games, there's all kinds of sports activities, and every different city-state will send their own like best contesters for all the different things. And then you see whichever city-state is then the best, because they do the best in the activities, right? It's still something we do up until this day, right? It's pretty remarkable. So they say, okay, come with your families, please. We're hosting the Olympic Games. You don't have to bring anything. We have food and drink and everything for you. It's all good, right? So then, of course, people want to defend their honor. So and they follow, and they all go to the city of Rome. And then when they get to the city, then the gate opens, and then sorry, I'm getting a message at the same time about work, doesn't matter. So then they come at the gate, and then the people at the gate say, okay, welcome to Rome, it's going to be amazing. Here is a glass of wine, drink it. And then when the people want to go inside, they say, hey, why are you guys carrying swords? You don't have to bring swords into our city. And then the people say, well, I'd like to keep my sword, please. And then they say, well, how about I give you this tiny little number over here? Choops. And then you see this basket, it have the same number. You can put all your swords and stuff in this basket, and then I'll give you the number, and then when you leave again, when the games are done, you give me the number and I'll give you the basket. And then the people say, I don't know about that, right? But then of course they look inside and they see everybody's having fun already, so then they're like, okay, well, if everybody give up their weapons, then I guess we can too, right? So they do. And it's so much fun. The games commence, everybody's having a great time. It's going on for like a couple of days already. Everybody's really at ease, they're drinking, it's fun, the Romans aren't that bad after all, right? But then, one day, in the middle of the night, whoa, lots of noise everywhere and screaming and shouting, and everybody's like, what's going on? And there, all the Romans have picked up their weapons and their swords, and they basically separate all the women from the men, the children, and the old people. And at sword point, they force all the men and children and old people out of the city gates. And they keep all the women. And this is called the rape of the Sabine women, ladies and gentlemen. There's lots of paintings about this. There's lots of statues about this. Basically, they just steal all the women from all the neighboring city-states, right? Now, all these people, of course, that have been just kicked out of the gate without their weapons, without their clothes, without any of their belongings, now have to all start to walk back home to then try and organize themselves to counterattack and come back for all their women, right? So, of course, they do. Whoops. But by this point, a lot of these women, of course, have been raped and they are pregnant. So now, when they start to have this giant war over who gets the women back, the women jump in the middle and they say, please stop killing my father. Stop killing my mother. Stop killing my new husband. I have a child now, right? So basically, by doing this, the Romans sort of merged themselves and repopulate themselves a lot more, which I think is pretty savage. History is so savage, you have no idea, right? So that is the beginning really of the growth of the Roman Empire, right? So in the beginning, the Roman Empire is pretty small, right? And in the beginning, it is a basically a kingdom. Now, I have to explain a little bit because when Romulus takes power, he's the king, so he's all powerful all by himself. I'll take a second break. Yeah, go ahead.
Grade 6 and then 7S are just going to work on their ugly Christmas sweaters for the competition.
Excelente.
And then
Where do I have to keep them? In here?
you can just put them back in my room when you're done.
No,
They're
where do
gonna
I?
come to you this afternoon.
Oh, they're coming in here?
Whatever you like. You can come to my room, whatever you want.
It doesn't matter. They're
Doesn't
both
matter to me.
friends? They're
You
both
have to-
French class, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha,
So I
okay.
looked at the schedule
Yes.
and you're supervising both of them. That's what
Yes.
I was going to do with them today.
Perfect.
So
Okay, I will do that.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, getting back into my train of thought. Here I go. I'm at school, so a lot of people have questions, obviously. Okay, so Romulus, when he's king, he of course wants to be in power and stay in power. So whenever he welcomes a wealthy individual that invests money in the city, they will become part of the Senate. So he invents something called the Senate, which is a group of 100 wealthy men. And these 100 wealthy men, they help him make decisions. He has the final say in it, but these senators together discuss different options, right? So if you were very wealthy and you would invest in the city of Rome, you could become part of this class, the senator class, right? And then you basically help the king rule, right? So the senator class will remain throughout the whole Roman Empire and its history, and their role will be remaining the same. It will help the government or help make all the decisions, right? Now, in the beginning, the Romans will be a kingdom, and they will have like, I think 12 kings in a row or 7, I can never remember, like I'm sorry, it doesn't really matter to me, but they have many different kings in a row, right? And then after the last king, because he was so incredibly bad as a king, the people have had enough of it. So they decide they have to come up with a better or more fair political system. So then what they do is they say they invent, or at least the Romans will say that they invent this, even though it's not a Roman invention. Obviously it's a Greek invention, but anything that is Roman basically is Greek. It just has a new name because their origin is Greek, right? They invent something called democracy. And in a democracy is different than a kingdom, because in a democracy everybody has equal rights. So that means rules apply to everybody the same, and it also means that everybody has a vote in what they want the government to do, right? So that is called a democracy. Now, a democracy is a political system that all Western civilization is using at this moment. Everybody has a vote, and everybody has equal rights, and all laws apply the same to everyone. That is the basic concept. And then you get to choose who you want to represent you in your government, and then of course in the government the majority of votes is whatever the decision is going to be, right? And they are held accountable, because if I vote on somebody but then they do things that they didn't say to me that they were going to do, then obviously I'm not going to vote on them or for them again, right? So democracy is a political system. Now, the Romans also came up with another political system, and that system is called a dictatorship, right? And a dictatorship is originally invented for times of great stress. So sometimes Rome would face, for example, a giant war, and they had to make some really rash decisions, or there would be like a drought and there wouldn't be enough food. So really harsh decisions had to be made. Then that's very difficult in a democracy, because in a democracy everybody has an opinion, everybody wants to vote, so it might take too long. So then the Romans said, why don't we create a dictatorship? So we appoint two people, and these two people will become the boss. They will be all powerful. They get to make all the decisions, and everybody just has to listen, right? So 1 month, one would make all the decisions, and then the other one could step in and they could switch roles. Now, they could do this only for a period maximum of 1 year, right? And this has happened several times in Roman history, that there would be a war, somebody would be appointed dictator, they would make decisions, they would like win the war, then the war was done, and then the dictator would say, okay, you know, I have dictated all the things that I wanted you to do, it was a success, whatever, I'm going to let go of my powers and we can go back to a democracy, right? So that happened several times. So then, of course, there was one guy named Julius Caesar, and he was like, you know what? I'm very much enjoying being all powerful, so I'm not gonna let go of any of these powers anymore, right? So there's different political systems. Now, democracy is a really big one, because that is something that we still use till this day. And there still are dictators too, right? They're alone and all powerful. Okay, so the Roman Empire will become like really big and powerful because they invade a lot of countries around them. So they invest a lot of money in an army, a professional army that is always ready to fight, right? They are the only ones in this time period that have an army that is always, well, that's professional. Everybody else is just like farmers, and then they say, okay, it's time to go to war, stop farming, pick up your weapons, let's go, we have to fight. The Romans are like, no, we're just always going to fight, we're always going to invade people, and we're just gonna keep on invading people because we enjoy it so much, right? And that is what they do. They invade all countries around them, or all city-states, and they just keep on growing and growing, and they put this money that they get, because they get a lot of slaves, they take a lot of stuff for free, they invest this into building a bigger army, and they invest this into building their city, right? And that is really what they do. So they have a lot of great military inventions. This is the second time I do this video. I added, last time I added like a YouTube clip in it, but then it like didn't record anymore. So I'm not going to do that today. But they have great breakthroughs in scientific military process, right? Cool. Okay, so if you were a Roman soldier, you would be in the army for 30 years, and it was a great honor and career opportunity, right? You would be paid till about this in gold, and it would be like $54,000 a year, which is like, it's quite a decent salary, right? And then would also be rewarded like a plot of land at the end. So after 25 years of service, the last 5 years you would serve in Rome, you would get like an easy job, like just guard like a little whatever, something like a door or something simple, right? And then after your total 30 years of service, you would get like a plot of land. This was like your pension plan. So you could live on this, or you could sell it, you could do with it whatever you want, right? Now, the base salary of the 54,000 a year, that's just your base salary, because if you were to invade a new place, then they would take a lot of slaves, they would pillage and like steal a lot of things. So that would all still come on top of your basic salary, right? So it was really a lucrative business, right? If you managed to survive. Well, they did manage to survive a lot because they were always training and they were very serious about their warcraft, right? Okay, cool. Roman tactics and training still very prevalent to this day, right? So they were really superior at fighting against anybody. Nobody really had any answer to fighting them, right? Okay. Now the Romans had one main competitor in this time period, and that were the Carthaginians. Now I want to tell you more, but I've been talking for a really long time, so I'm gonna call it quits over here.